And to give us the latest on the West Asia situation, we are joined by DD India's Shubhendu Ghosh from New Delhi. Hi Shubhendu, big statement from Donald Trump. We'll talk about that first. He says US military operations in Iran could end within 2 to 3 weeks and also to address the nation tomorrow. Does this signal the beginning of the end?
Hello, Abhishek. It's a big statement indeed, but it, as is the case often with President Donald Trump, leaves more questions than answers. We've seen from the beginning of this Iran war, which has now exceeded the duration of a month, is now in its fifth week, that there are mixed signals coming out of the United States administration led by President Trump. If indeed the war has to end in 2 to 3 weeks, what are the conditions under which the war is going to end? President Trump has also said that Iran doesn't have to make a deal. What happened to a certain negotiation that he said was going on with, in his words again, a reasonable Iranian regime? Also, the initial objectives of the conflict, of regime change, of ensuring the nuclear capacity of Iran is completely obliterated, that the missile manufacturing capacity of Iran is completely obliterated. Have those objectives been clearly achieved? Are questions that are left open. Also, questions that are being asked are what happens to Israeli involvement in this conflict? Will the Israel-Iran war continue even if US withdraws? And if US indeed intends to withdraw in just a couple of weeks, what is the objective of landing more and more Marines? There's some 57,000 American troops. Now the strength has increased highest since the past couple of decades, since 2003. So in that sense, mixed signals about what President Trump seeks to achieve and what America is doing on the ground. So that trend really continues. And bigger questions also about the manner in which what happens to the Strait of Hormuz. It appears, again, referring to a statement, President Trump appears to be washing his hands of the American responsibility vis-a-vis the Strait of Hormuz. It is said that now nations who need oil from the Strait of Hormuz must come and get it with their own capacity. America, I mean, to put it in context, America happens to be the world's biggest oil producer. It does not directly need, as it were, oil and energy supplies from the Strait of Hormuz. It produces its own as compared to other nations in the world. But that does not really make American economy immune to the global energy crisis. If you look at the price of fuel in America, gasoline for common people, it has risen from $2.98 per gallon to about over $4 per gallon, which is about 30% rise in just these a few weeks of the conflict. So in that sense, experts also say that even if the conflict was to end in a couple of weeks, the energy crisis is not going to go away in a short period. That's not how energy prices work. So more questions than answers. We'll have to wait and watch, of course, what President Trump has to say in his address to the nation later tonight.
But what's the situation on the ground, Shubhendu? Israel forging new allies. We heard Netanyahu saying that Trump signals exit, and we are still seeing active airstrikes and explosions despite talk of a possible US exit.
That's right, Abhishek. Pretty much the conflict status quo, as it were, the fighting strikes, missile and drone strikes from both sides continue as usual. Just a day ago, we saw those bunker buster bombs being dropped in Isfahan and also Farrukh Shah in Iran, targeting what the Americans say were a major weapons depot underground and also a pharmaceutical plant, according to the Iranians. Also, the Gulf nations continue to bear the brunt of Iranian strikes. In the beginning of the show, you mentioned the latest about Bahrain, about Kuwait. Airport has been closed for many days now. Kuwait airport has been under constant bombardment by Iran. Bahrain, the sirens have been going on, emergency sirens indicating incoming missile or drone attack. Also, Saudi Arabia said that they had intercepted a couple of drones. So in that sense, fighting really continues in Lebanon as well, where another major humanitarian crisis is unfolding parallel to what is going on in the Iran conflict. In southern Lebanon in particular, Israel seeks to create a sort of buffer zone to the Litani River. people in southern Lebanon fear that it could mean long-term Israeli occupation of the region. So in that sense, the conflict really continues with that momentum that it had started with. And what the American president appears to be saying, that in a couple of weeks, the US could exit the conflict. But that doesn't say much about if the conflict would end in a couple of weeks.
But we want to understand from you, Shubhendu, could we see other regional actors also stepping in if direct US involvement reduces, like Trump also signals, conflict could resurface in another form, proxies maybe?
There are a host of possibilities that exist, Abhishek. If the United States were to exit this conflict at this point in time, say in a couple of weeks, it would really problematize the power equation in the region. But the Gulf nations, who hitherto have been depending on the American strikes, American leadership, to check Iranian drone and missile strikes, they will be left to fend on their own. Are they going to join hands with Israel? Many of these countries are not exactly allies of Israel, but they face a common challenge from Iran, at least in this conflict at present. Who are the allies that Israel is talking about, that it is in talks with? We've already seen Iran's proxies such as Hezbollah playing an active role in fighting with Israel in Lebanon, from Lebanon in particular. Houthis have also jumped into the conflict. So it'll be only time can tell, really, Abhishek, the manner in which this conflict will change shape and color if United States were to exit from this conflict. But then again, one comes back to that initial question: why did this conflict start if the objectives that President Trump initially had have not been conclusively achieved? So in that sense, what President Trump says later tonight, what Israeli Prime Minister gives details about who are the allies that are going to take forward the conflict, I think the answers would lie in there.
Yeah, things are still unclear. All right, Shubhendu, we'll leave it at that. Thank you for those updates.